And here we go. Welcome, everyone. It's already good afternoon, not even good morning anymore. And it's nice to be back here. And today we're going to be talking about, I'm actually going to share my screen so you can see what we're going to be talking about. Hang on a moment. I'm sure you love I know you love my slideshows, right, guys?
Yeah, certainly do. Great.
There we go. Okay. Okay, here we go. So today we're going to be talking about Jewish Wonder Women from Yehudit to the IDF. I could not resist. I know she's not the most dressed in the most sanua way, Wonder Woman, but we all love Gal Gadot, and she's our pride. It was a perfect thing, you know, Gal Gadot, our pride of Israel, and talking about Wonder Woman and talking about brave women. So, so she herself has a great story and has done some great service for Israel in the world. So today what we're going to be talking about is we're combining a few of my interests and passions, which is that those of you who've been following me for the past few years know that about, I think it's like 7 or 8 years ago now, someone approached me in Ohel Ari and said, my daughter's in 11th grade and there's like this new trend of religious girls starting to go more to the army in Israel. And we feel really lost and we don't really know how to guide them. And so I started to do some research and I created this evening in Ra'anana, which we call Kivun L'Sheirut, and which we have every year. It started at Ohel Ari, the initial years, and then we moved over to Matan and we joined forces with Amit Renanim, and it's become this community-wide evening where we have an informative event for young women in 11th and 12th grade. And it's not only about the Army, it's partly about going into the Army. It's also about doing national service, Shirut Leumi. It's really about finding a way to have a meaningful service and a meaningful Shirut. And also the girls often take a gap year and study somewhere. So it's really a way to kind of help them think about the next stage of their life. So today I would like to before we get back to talking about this new trend of religious young women in the Army, I'd like to take a step back and think about and relate this to Hanukkah and talk about the bravery of another woman, that is the bravery of Yehudit, and the role of Yehudit in the Hanukkah story of Hanukkah coming up. I know it's hard to believe Hanukkah is coming up next week, God willing, but there it is. What are you going to do? So we're going to look at just a couple of sources on Hanukkah to get us in the mood, and then we're going to learn a little bit about Yehudit. So first of all, there isn't so much said about Hanukkah in the Talmud, but where it is discussed is in the context of Tractate Shabbat. Those of you who've done your Daf Yomi have already been through this. And so naturally it appears in Tractate Shabbat because it has some relationship to Shabbat in the sense that we have candlelighting on Shabbos and candlelighting on Hanukkah. And so the thematic minds of the rabbis worked that way. And so here we hear the statement in Masachet Shabbat as follows. De'amar Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi, Nashim Chayavot B'ner Hanukkah. So Rabbi Yoshua ben Levi said, women are obligated in the Hanukkah lights, meaning that women have an obligation they have some obligation in this mitzvah, in this commandment. We don't yet know exactly what they have to do, but they are obligated. There are things that women are exempt from, but this is one that they're obligated in. Sha'af hen hayu bo tohanes, because, interesting statement, they too are part of the miracle. Now, I'll open it up a little bit to you if anyone wants to unmute. What does it mean that they were part of the miracle? Those of you who might know this and have learned this already can, you can participate as well. Maybe just we'll give people a few seconds to make some suggestions. What does it mean that they were part of the Hanukkah miracle? Okay, so I shall continue.
Hold on. But if we all know the answer, but we're not meant to tell you if we know the answer, then we can't answer.
No, you can. I wanted to give a few seconds to people who maybe didn't immediately know the answer.
What was it? Yehudit. Remember Yehudit? So Yehudit and Hannah, and there are lots of people who are part of the Hanukkah story.
Excellent. So first of all, Emma and Marjorie, Mrs. Glick, are pointing out that women played a key role in the Hanukkah story. Now, it's a little bit of a funny thing to say that, because when you learn in kindergarten about Hanukkah, you learn about Judah the Maccabee and all that. So suddenly, where's this Yehudit and Hannah, who martyred herself after her 7 sons martyred themselves? So there are stories in Jewish tradition, but they're not very, it's not, let's say, the same thing as Esther on Purim, where very clearly everyone can say there's a Mordechai and Esther were the Jewish hero and heroine of the holiday. Yehudit and Hannah are sort of secondary characters, but we'll take them. and so that's very much right. One way to read the sentence is that there were certain women who played a key role, and therefore all women need to commemorate that in some way. Interestingly, there's a famous debate between 2 Talmudic commentaries on what exactly this principle means of they too were included in the miracle. They too were part of the miracle. So it's a debate between, it says here Rashi, but it's actually his grandson Rashbam, and the Tosfot. These are Talmudic commentaries. So even if you don't learn Daf Yomi, you're getting exposed to some Talmudic learning here. So the first opinion is as follows. And in fact, this is going to sound very much like what Mishpachat Glick and Rimberg have shared with us. This says as follows: they indeed were part of the miracle, as it says. They were redeemed in the merit of the righteous women of that generation. Now, I did something a little bit tricky here. I jumped to another Talmud, to Tractate Psachim, where there it's talking about another mitzvah, the mitzvah to drink 4 cups of wine, where there women are also obligated. And so now they're talking about that. So we changed subject slightly, but it turns out that this principle, they too were part of the miracle, is used with regard to at least 3 things, certainly 3 mitzvot. 1 is Hanukkah candles, 2 is drinking 4 cups of wine at the Pesach Seder, and 3 is listening to the Megillah on Purim. And so here it explains that when it says on Pesach that the women have to drink wine, it's because they were redeemed in the merit of what we call the Nashim Tzidkaniot, the righteous women. And we also say this regarding Megillah reading. This is true with Megillah reading as well, since everyone was redeemed through Esther and Mordechai, of course, but we see there was a prominent female heroine in the holiday. So too, regarding Hanukkah candles in Tractate Shabbat. Here he doesn't mention Yehudit, but it is mentioned in other places. And so, because the question is in the Hanukkah story, who's the central woman? It seems that it's Yehudit. Now that's one way to view this sentence, this principle, this Talmudic principle of they too are part of the miracle. Another way to understand it is what Tosfot says. Tosfot is another medieval commentary on the Talmud, and he says, he rejects the opinion of Rashbam, quoted as Rashi here. This is difficult because they too indicates that they are ancillary. Okay, when you say they too were part of the miracle, it doesn't sound like they were a significant part of the miracle. It sounds like they also came along with the miracle. According to his explanation, it should just say they were part of the miracle, right? If you held that Esther had an equal role to Mordechai, then if you held that that was the definition of they too were part of the miracle, then it would just say women were part of the miracle just like men were part of the miracle. But he's saying they too emphasizes that they were secondary. Therefore, it seems to me that they too were subject to the uncertainty, the safek, to destroy, kill, and annihilate, lashmid, la'arog, u'la'abed, as we say on Purim. So too on Pesach, they were enslaved to Pharaoh in Egypt. And on Hanukkah, the decree was mightily against them. So Tosfot saying they too were part of the miracle means women were also endangered. Therefore, women also have to commemorate all of these commandments. So we see that this is one of the most famous Talmudic debates among Talmudic commentaries. One opinion is they too are part of the miracle, is that there's a female star, a Wonder Woman associated with the holiday, the righteous women for Pesach, Yehudit for Hanukkah, Esther for Purim. And the second opinion is that no, women were just also redeemed there. They were also in danger and they were also redeemed. And so women should take part in the mitzvah. So a little bit of Talmudic thinking over lunch here. Now, I don't know if Richard's around, but but we're going to look at this painting for just a moment.
Wonderful woman.
Yes, go on. You want to say something about it?
Oh, Gentileschi. No, she was just an incredible female artist in a time when most artists were men. Exactly. And she's just had an amazing exhibition in the UK that nobody could see. But
wow.
I read about it.
Oh, fantastic. So yes, I also am a big fan. This is a painting by Artemisia Gentileschi, right? Did I say it right? An Italian female painter. Really, there were not many female painters at all. So quite amazing. And this is from the famous story of Yehudit, Judith slaying Holofernes. And so where does this story come from? Mordechai and Esther, we have in the Tanakh, we have in the Bible. Where is this Judith coming from? So it turns out that there is a book of Judith, okay? And it's just not part of our traditional canon. It's not in the Tanakh, it's not in the Mishnah or Talmud. It does make its way into the Midrashic world later on, but it actually comes from a Second Temple book called Judith, which is what's not, it's considered, it's called the Apocrypha. In Hebrew, we call it Sfarim Chitzonim, external books. They're books that were not included in the Torah, but they were written around the time or around biblical times or post-biblical times. And so much of how they're written actually seems quite similar to how the Bible is written. We also have the Book of Maccabees. There's all sorts of books that weren't included, but they have, for academics and for historians and people who are interested in this, interesting historical information. And so, in fact, this is how we have preserved the story of Judith. And then it makes its way later on into Jewish tradition in the medieval times through Midrash. So clearly what I view this as is like on the part of Jews throughout history, there was this desire to Purim had Mordechai and Esther, Pesach had Moshe and Miriam and the righteous women. Where's the female heroine on Hanukkah? It was important. We see that we're looking for role models. Just like today, back then, they were also looking for female role models. Now, this picture is not, I'm not sure we want the women of our world to be inspired by this, but actually quite interesting biographical fact, which I read about, is that Artemisia herself suffered. She was actually, unfortunately, raped by one of her tutors, and historians claim that this photo, she's actually made the face of the guy of Holofernes, who she is killing. We're going to tell you who Holofernes is soon. The image of her teacher who had assaulted her, and so we see that she's really trying to. It's almost therapeutic and revenge on her part. Quite an amazing thing. So anyway, now let's just talk about what we know about Judith. The book of Judith tells us that she comes from a town called Betulia, which is besieged by Holofernes. Holofernes is a Babylonian general working under the king Nebuchadnezzar. And what happens is they are being besieged, and the Chachamim, the Zkenim, the elders, were going to surrender. But instead, Yehudit says, and Yehudit sounds probably a lot like Yehuda, Yehudit, right? She's the female counterpart to Yehuda HaMaccabi. She takes matters into her own hand. She enters the enemy camp, and she gets invited into Holofernes' tents because of her beauty, and she managed to make her way in. And she feeds him lots of salty cheese, making him very tired. She gave him a little wine with it as well. And she prays to Hashem for help, and then she takes his sword and chops off his head. And so we see here, not that we would, want this for our daughters, but we see that incredible bravery on the part of risking her life to save the Jewish people. This story echoes several biblical stories: the story of Esther, the story of Yael and Sisera in the book of Judges, where she also killed the general by getting him to go to sleep. Because of the confusion this wreaked on the camp, the Jews managed to overcome the Babylonians here. And you'll see that the story, it's a little funny because we're talking about the Babylonians, but it becomes associated with Hanukkah and the Greeks, but it doesn't matter. For the sake of Jewish tradition, it works. And the story ends with Judith leading a song of praise and dancing with timbrels, who also sounds like our heroine Miriam. And so we see that there's like this desire to keep these themes running through each of the Jewish holidays, to have these role models, both male and female, in leadership roles, which is quite an amazing thing. And there is a minhag, a custom of eating cheese products on Hanukkah, lesser known, but less known than latkes and sufganiyot. But that is based, that people trace that back to this story that she fed him salty cheese to make him sleepy, which is interesting. So with that in mind, seeing Judith's bravery, I wanted to also just take a few moments to tell you a little bit about what's going on in Israel today in terms of religious women serving in Tzahal and the IDF. Now, I wanted to say that everything I say here is not at all to in any way diminish the incredible work of young women who do national service, Shirut Leumi. They do incredible things, and they always have, and there's new and exciting things to do in terms of national service and army service all the time. But because I became a little bit involved in this particular area, I'm highlighting this today. So there have always been women in the Israeli army. There's always been religious women in the Israeli army since the beginning of the state. This is a nice old picture. But the fact that religious young women are taking more and more, are taking it on more and more to go into the army is a very interesting new phenomenon which started in around the year 2010 and moving forward. Interestingly, from already the 1970s, this Rabbi Goren, who was the chief rabbi of the IDF for a number of years, actually there's a handwritten responsa to a young woman who asks him, "I'm religious, but I want to go to the army. Is that okay?" He explicitly tells her it's okay if she does it in a way that, that is non-combat and preserves her identity. And so what we're seeing is that there's a tremendous amount to do in the Israeli army, which is non-combat. There's a tremendous amount of support services that young men and women can do. And so because of that, there's all these roles which are more about the intellect or having the ability to teach. There's all sorts of things to do which young women are taking on for themselves. There's actually a whole organization, which I've pointed out down here, Aluma, which has a section called Meshartot B'Emunah, serving with faith, which supports religious girls in the army. And these statistics show you what's happening. In 2010, 950 girls who identify as religious drafted into the IDF. In 2017, 2,700 girls who identify as religious drafted into IDF. So in just 7 years, the numbers really more than doubled, almost tripled, which is quite amazing. The projection is that by 2022, possibly 4,000 girls per year who identify as religious will be drafted into the IDF, which is quite a strong projection within a definite increase. And so we see that there's something happening in Israeli society where the army itself has made it more friendly to religious girls, and where religious girls are finding a way to express their intellectual and social abilities and their commitment to Zionism through serving in the army. And there's been this great surge. I just wanted to highlight, this was a tragic story. This young woman, Tamar Ariel, actually broke this incredible glass ceiling. She was the first religious woman to become an Air Force navigator and the first female Orthodox pilot. Since then, there's been another few, I think. But after she finished her army service, she went on one of these trips, and very tragically, she died in this. There was this terrible blizzard in the Himalayas a couple of years ago, and sadly, she was killed there. But her service is really. She really broke an incredible glass ceiling and reached, really paved the way for many religious girls, which was quite an amazing thing. And so I think that we can be inspired by our story of Yehudit and of brave women throughout history, and see that we have all of our Yehudits in Ohel Ari and around Israel doing their share to protect the Jewish people. And so I wish everyone on this note lots of strength and happy Hanukkah. And I'm here if you want to ask any questions or discuss more.
Thank you very much.
I do have one question. Oh, sorry. Do you believe that she was an actual real person, or you think it was just a story that was symbolic of the situation of the time?
Oy, it's a hard question. It's, you know, it's funny. Would you ask the same question about Esther?
Yes.
Yeah. So I think the thing is, like, when, you know, from a religious worldview, we believe these were real people. When you go into the academic world, they start to question all of that. But there is, I believe there's probably some kernel of truth in these stories. I think that, you know, I don't think they're made up. I think that they often are preserving something, whether it was this exact story or not, you know, who knows, but it certainly has worked its way into the hearts and, you know, and literature of the Jewish people. There's no question about that.
But it is funny, because I remember when I was growing, I mean, I learned about Judith from quite a young age, and Holofernes, but people didn't know who on earth I was talking about. But somehow people don't want to know about her.
Yeah.
I don't know why. Like Yael, we're very happy to know that Yael somehow managed to make Sisera very tired and killed him. Have a feeling Judith probably did the same thing, but I don't know.
I think the fact that she's from the Apocrypha, which is not a traditionally studied part of Jewish tradition, I think that's a big, you know, people don't really know what to do with that.
But the whole Sefer Maccabim is in the Apocrypha. Mm-hmm. I guess it's in the Gemara. But,
right. I mean, they're mentioned very, very little, you know, and so, yeah, it's a whole interesting part of Jewish history that they represent, and there were tensions, right, in terms of the Beit HaMikdash and the priests and what was going on there. There was a lot of tensions, a lot of Jewish politics back then. So yes, it's an interesting problem.
And just now to move sideways, if all the religious girls in Israel go into the army, who's doing Sherut Leumi, which the country also depends on?
For sure, I don't think ever all the religious girls will go into the army. You know, if it breaks the 50% mark, I'll be surprised. I mean, what they're saying is, you know, maybe in the next decade it'll break the 50. We're not even at 50% at this point. I think there'll always be both. By the way, also there are Israeli Arabs who do national service.
I was going to say, and there are boys who do national service, and non-religious. Can non-religious girls do national service?
There's a whole non-religious.
I think they can, but before the army.
If you're not eligible to go into the army for a medical reason,
right,
religious or not religious, you can do national service.
Right, but you can't opt out. Like a religious girl has to prove that she's religious and opt out to do Sherut Leumi.
Yeah.
So I think most, you know, unless you're a volunteer, you probably can't opt.
But it is interesting. You're looking at your dates is fascinating, because my Rachel is 30. Where are the girls? 31, and she considered doing the army. She even did some of the Mionim, and then she just was like, you know, and there was no encouragement at Sphere,
right,
whatsoever.
Right, 100%. And you know, there's still many high schools that won't.
And she regrets it, by the way. She would love to have done the army.
Right.
Funny, because Avigal says that sometimes as well. My daughter is the same age as Emma's.
Interesting.
Yeah, except the funny thing is,
didn't go ahead with it, and then because
same as Rach,
she did Sherut Leumi.
Even though I'm sure they did wonderful things and gained very good life skills.
Funnily enough, Rachel, one of the jobs she was offered was a Madricha in Museum Hel Aver. And what did she do? She was a Madricha in Givat Moshe. Right. So she basically did what she would have done, and then the second year she was at Leket.
Oh, right.
which was great actually.
Yeah.
And she's got a connection there to this day.
Yes, yes, yes.
A big fan.
No, they're all doing wonderful, amazing things, and we're so lucky. And it's amazing for youth to have that experience, to learn what it is to give back to society.
Absolutely.
I think
Britain will be a lot better with it. Some kind of Sherlock Learning.
Could be. Nice to see everyone. Nice to see you, Hila. I haven't seen you in a long time.
Absolutely. Good to see you. Good to see you.
So wishing everyone.
So we'll have to, Inez, if you can hear us next week, one of us is going to come over and.
Inez is gone.
So we've got to work out. It's not fair.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll go over there this week. Do a Zoom thing, see if we can work it out.
Okay.
Karen, thank you so much. Please, everyone, think of ideas for what we can do in other weeks. And if you've got something you want to share with us, a good story, some good photos, anything fun, you know?
Or if you do something really, if your work is interesting, like Carol's
Yes.
her previous life as a
story
lawyer
was amazing.
in England, that was really very interesting. So
yeah.
Thank you.
And I did have a really good idea for a social that I thought the Shul would pick up and run with, and they didn't. Nobody got back to me, so maybe we'll do it here.
Okay. Anyway, thank you, everybody. Thank you, Karen.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Karen.
Thank you.